Join me for these beautiful crystal earrings, exactly as they say. If you need any materials like the 18mm rivoli or seed beads or crystals, check below the video in the description to get links to purchase them from us online. Gather up all your materials on your bead on it board and let's get ready to make these beautiful crystal earrings. So to begin our beautiful crystal earrings, we have an 18mm rivoli, 4mm bicones, 15s, and 2 colors of 11. I'm using a blue dragon thread in size 6, and then you want to make sure to use a size 11 or 12 English beading needle. Those are going to be the ones on the outsides of your packet if you have the bead tech needles. We're going to be doing Hubble stitch, and I have about 5 feet of thread with a stop bead on the end. I've done 3 units of the Hubble stitch just so I can explain it a little bit and then show it in action. Our original bezel that's going to hold the crystal in is going to be 13 units of our Hubble stitch. We're then going to sew it together to create a base and do some additional stitching on the outside to create this beautiful crystal earring. I've done 3 units to show you what it looks like and to let you know it's okay if they flip around. I'm going to bring my camera in very close so you can see exactly how to do the Hubble stitch. So we already have that Hubble stitch. The Hubble stitch consists of 1, 2, 3 beads of one color and then a 4th bead at the top of another color. To create your Hubble stitch, I already have 3 here, they're all independent units. We're going to go in and add 3 beads to our needle. Let them drop down next to first the stop bead and then after that the last Hubble unit. Your needle goes from bead number 1 and sews toward bead number 2 and exits. This is going to create a little triangle with your beads. Sometimes you just kind of need to adjust it there because you want to get that little bit of a triangular look. See how that triangle is sitting and we almost have an opening there at the top? That's where we're going to add bead number 4. So bead number 4 is going to be my alternate 11-0 color, and then I'm going to sew down bead number 2. So what we're doing is adding bead number 4 between beads number 1 and 2 that we just added, and it's just going to sit there right on the top. One more time doing that same Hubble stitch unit. 3 beads go on. You drop those down to the last unit, trying to not let a ton of extra thread showing. Sewing through bead number 1 toward bead number 2, letting the thread exit prior to bead number 2, creating and pulling your little triangle there. Add bead number 4 and sew down bead number 2. You're going to do a total of 13 independent units. I have 5 on mine right now, so I have a couple more to go, and then we're going to join them together in a rounded section to create our back of our bezel. After completing your 13 units, we are going to connect unit 13 to unit number 1. Coming out of the end of unit 13, just as if we're getting ready to do a 14th unit, we're going to go back to number 1 and sew through bead number 1, which is going to be that bead next to our stop bead. I want you then, you're going to see that kind of all mixed up there. I want you then to sew down through bead number 2. So you're skipping over that muscat bead and you're sewing down through bead number 2. Finish off by sewing through bead number 3, which is the bottom of that Hubble stitch unit. Once you're at the bottom, we are going to connect all of the Hubble stitch units by adding an additional 11-0 seed bead to the base line of all of those. It's going to look like an entire circle of just the same bead. That is going to force the goldeny beads, that muscat color, to sit towards the upper edge. Once again, bringing the camera in a little bit closer, you're going to notice that your thread is coming out on the left side of the bottom of Hubble stitch number 1. Add another 11-0 seed bead and sew through the bottom bead of Hubble stitch number 13. Add an 11-0 and sew through the bottom of Hubble stitch number 12. See how that stitch there is turned, that the coppery colors to the bottom? Just flip it and force it to the top and then sew through the bottom bead of that unit. You're going to add an 11-0 to the bottom or the baseline of all of these Hubble stitch units and connect them together. Again, that's going to force that coppery muscat bead towards the outer edge, which will allow us to get ready to do our second layer of our bezel. So you can see how it's starting to force those out, those lay down. Go ahead and continue connecting all of the units, forcing that copper bead towards the outside and getting that nice consistent circle. Once you complete that inner loop where it now looks like that consistent row of your 11-0 seed beads in that turquoisey color, what you're going to want to do is reinforce. So I took my thread and needle back through that entire row. Anytime you have a bezel where you have the crystal or something that's getting kind of stuck in there, you want to make sure to reinforce the interior as well as the exterior row because you don't want to lose your crystal. From here, after going through and reinforcing that row, you're going to be coming out one of the bottom beads of the Hubble stitch. We're going to step up by going through bead number 1 of that same Hubble stitch unit, and then come out the top bead, bead number 4 of that Hubble stitch unit. From here, we are going to be connecting to our next Hubble unit. However, we need to get our Hubble stitch started. So I'm going to add 2 beads of our muscat color, go up or back through bead number, 3 there, back up through bead number 1, and add this time the opposite color, that nice turquoisey color, and make that bead number 4. Now we're going to do the same thing again, but we need to make our circle expand. So to do so, we're going to add 1, 2, and 3 of our beads. This is going to use our first bead that we're putting on bead number 1 there as a connector. So we're going to basically forget that that bead is even there. You're going to go into the next point of the last Hubble unit there, or the previous row, and you're going to sew toward the Hubble unit you just finished. So I'm adding 3 beads, and then I'm going through what is going to be bead number 3 of the Hubble stitch. Because remember, bead number 1 on my needle, we're just forgetting about. When that folds down, you're going to sew up bead number 2, which we're just going to call bead number 1 of our Hubble stitch because we're forgetting about that first one. That's -1, and this bead is going to be 1. Sewing up bead number 1, adding bead number 4, and then once again sewing down bead number 2. So it's just like we're continuing with that Hubble stitch as we go along. So we're going to add again 3 of those muscat color, -1 bead, or we'll call it 0 bead, 1 and 2 beads after that. Go to the next top of the next Hubble unit, sewing back towards the unit we just finished. Skip over bead 0, sew up through bead number 1 toward bead number 2. Add bead number 4 because that bottom bead there is bead number 3 normally of our Hubble stitch, the one that's already there and connected, and then sew down bead number 2. So I'll show it one more time. Bead 0, 1, and 2 go on. Sew through bead number 3, which is the one that's already there from the previous Hubble row. Skip over bead 0, sew up through bead number 1, exiting before bead number 2. Add your 4th bead to your Hubble stitch and sew down bead number 2. You're going to continue the whole way around this circle, getting that nice netting effect, which also these make great earrings for that nice open look. Go ahead and add it the whole way around your circle until we get back to the start, and I'll show you how to connect them. Finishing up the outer row then, after you have this nice netting effect, we are going to add 1 more of our 11-0 in that muscat color to combine number 13 with number 1, 13 with 1. Add 1 bead, sew up through bead number 1. We're also going to step up through bead number 4, that turquoisey one there at the top. And now we're going to create a little bit of picot trim right on the outside of all of our beads. Add 3 more of the color that you're working with. You're going to circle the thread around. So it's coming out the left-hand side there. You're adding 3 beads, and then you're sewing back through that same bead. From here, sew through beads 1, 2, 3 of that muscat color leading up to your next turquoise peak there. So through the turquoise, bring your thread out. 1, 2, 3 beads get added. And you sew back through that bead. At the same time, sewing through that bead, I sew through beads 1, 2, 3 if I can, just to speed up my sewing process, and then also through the next top bead. Fold those. You see how I just kind of push them with my fingers to get that nice squared shape, and then continue on till you have a total of those 13 peaks created. So you're just going to sew around that entire outer row here, adding in those little peaks, which we're going to connect with and which really start to take the focus and bring it toward the front of the design. After creating all of your points, we're going to start to bring that bezel in and plop in our 18mm rivoli. So coming out the top of one of those 3-point picot trims, we're going to come out of that middle bead of the 3 we just added, going around for those little peaks, and we are going to add 2 of our 11/0s in that copper color. Add 2 11/0s, and then you're going to sew into the top of the next little picot trim top. Again, coming out then the next top, add your 2 beads. Naturally, what's going to start to happen is it's going to start to pull in and create almost like a bowl shape. You can go about 3/4 of the way through before you need to pick up your 18mm rivoli and put it in the middle. So just rotate the whole way around, adding in 2 of your 11s between each of the tops of those turquoise matted beads here. And as you go around, pull it in towards the center, and then get ready to plop in your crystal. And then we'll do one more rotation on the outside. After completing your 2 beads here, we're going to go sew back into that first little peak, which brings this into a round loop. You can see I've put my crystal in the middle. And we're going to tighten it up a little bit more by adding 1 15/0 now between each of our sets of 2 of our copper beads. Add a 15/0 and go through the 2 copper beads. 15/0 through the 2 copper. We're going to add 1 15/0 to sit basically right above the turquoise 11 the whole way around here. And then just like we did along the back where I said you always want to take 2 pieces of thread through that back line to reinforce, we're going to do the same thing along the front. So we're going to add our 15/0s, pulling this in just a little bit tighter, and then take our thread pass one more time around that interior before we get to the outside and add some of our little flare and start to get to add our crystals. Once you finish with your center row around your rivoli, we're going to come to the outer edge, and we are going to add along that same upper bead here that we added the 2 15s to the front, the one that sits along the back. We're going to go from first of our each blue zircon turquoisey bead, and we're going to add a series of 15 11 15. So I'm coming out the front through 2 of my copper beads. I'm going to go down through this little almost right angle weave unit here, and we're going to get to that base bead, or the bead that's closest to the one in the back. From here, add a 15 11 in the copper and 15, and then pick up and sew through the next 11/0 that sits in the same position to the left of it. Again, 15 11 15 through that next turquoise bead. Go around the whole outer loop here, adding in these 3 beads and just decorating the top of that rivoli. And what that's doing then also is pulling the bezel so that it fits even more exact along the outer edge. After completing adding in your 3 seed beads on the sides of your crystal, what we want to do is add the top of our piece. And that top of our piece is going to consist of a total of 5 4mm crystals. I want you to bring in your thread and needle out one of your copper 11/0s that sits on the top of that section of 3 that you just added. Doesn't matter where, we'll establish the top. If you don't like the fringe along the bottom, you can actually stop here as well. Add 2 15s and 11 4mm crystal, 11 4mm crystal, 11, 4, and then go up through the first side of your wire guard. Come down through the opposite side of the wire guard and go back through that same first 4mm bicomb. Pull the thread and wire through that first little bicomb and then repeat the pattern in the opposite way. 11 crystal, 11 crystal, 11 followed by 2 15s. We're going to connect to the opposite side of the rivoli to create the top. When looking at how to create the top, you're going to notice that there's 1, 2, 3, and then we're going into the fourth of our 11 OC bead. So we're going to count over 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're going to come down through that 11 OC bead and the 15 right after it. That's going to add that triangle to the top here, and you're just going to pick up the wire guard, make sure there's no extra thread showing, give a little tight pull, and we're going to come down through this opposite side to add the bottom fringe. Like I said, we will have an opportunity to reinforce this top while we're adding the fringe along the bottom. If you're not crazy about the fringe, you can stop your earring right here to complete your piece, just backing around the thread, reinforcing and tying it off. After completing your little triangle top here, what we want to do is come down the opposite side, going through the 15, 11, 15, and then the 11 turquoise, down till you're on your second drop. So we went through and came through that one there, second one stayed open, we're coming out the third one here. From here we're going to start to add our drops. The drops are going to consist of 11-0, then our 4mm crystal, then the 11-0 to work as the anchor. Take your thread and needle back through that same 4mm crystal, add one more 11, and then sew into the next group of 15, 11, 15. Coming out then, we're going to repeat that 5 total times. 11, crystal, 11. Push it up against your project. Go back through just the crystal. Tighten up your thread, making sure there's not any extra thread showing. Add another 11 and sew through the next group of 3. That's 2. I have 3 more to go to add those initial drops. After finishing the 5 drops along the bottom, take your thread and needle and retrace all of the beads going through, reinforcing the top, coming back down along the side, the whole way down to the middle, through the 11 with the 15s on the side, back till you get to this second bicomb. The second bicomb we're going to come out of and then add our bottom section here. So go on through and go through the turquoise 11, up through those 3 little beads, the 15, 11, 15 collection. Come on out through the 11 here along the side. Then reinforce your clasp. Come down the left side and then get your needle and thread to be positioned at the second crystal in, and we'll add our additional drops. So I'm getting into position now, going down through the second bicomb, through the bead that works as the anchor at the bottom, back up through the bicomb, and back out through the 11-0 right after the bicomb. When I'm out the 11-0, that's where we're going to create our first drop. And our first drop is going to consist of 2 11s, a 15, and a crystal. So we're going 2 11s, 1 15, followed by 1 crystal, followed by 1 of our 11s. Going back up through the 15, right there, we're going to, going back through the crystal, give a nice tight pull to tighten that up, add a 15, go back up through those 2 11s prior to the 15, and then into the next 11-0 prior to the next bicomb drop. So I'm going to turn it this way, even though it's a little bit awkward to sew, so I can show you where we're sewing in to the piece here. Down through that 11-0 seat bead. Once you get that one done, we're going to do the same thing in between the 3rd and 4th crystal. So snake your thread back through, down through the crystal, through the drop, or through the seed bead at the bottom that works as the anchor, back up through the crystal, and out through the 11 that sits after it. Coming out through the 11 that sits after it, we're doing the exact same thing. We're doing a 2 11s, 1 15, 1 crystal, 1 11, back up through the crystal, tightening up that thread, adding another 15, and then going up through those 2 11s prior to the 15. When you're out there, you're going to go over to the next drop and go down through the 11-0 prior to the crystal. That's going to position those 2 drops right there in place and get ready to link between them with an additional crystal. Post coming out of that 11-0, you're going to pick up your needle, go through the 4mm bead, go through the 11 that works at the anchor at the bottom, and this is the crystal drop number 4 there from the original 5. Go back up through the crystal, and this time go back into the seed bead on the left, or the one closest to crystal number 3. We're going to get ready then to drop down that crystal that we just finished, down through the 15-0, down through the 11s, into the crystal, and then out through the 11-0 that works as the anchor along the bottom. Along the bottom here, we're going to create that little swing drop by adding in 2 of our 11s, 1 15, 1 more of our crystals, followed by a 15, and 2 11s. Those beads then get anchored to the 11 that's on the left-hand side that we added first. And that creates that little swing drop along the bottom here. From here, we're going to get rid of the thread. To get rid of the thread, go ahead and sew it back up into the project. Connect to that starter thread along the back, and we're simply going to tie knots together. And when you tie the knot together, then you're going to burn it down till you can't see it. Push on the ear wire, and our crystal earrings will be completed. Again, at the end, once you tie those 2 thread ends together, you're just going to take your thread burner in the back of the piece here, lift those strands up, burn them down close to the piece, and then burn the end flat against the project. Flipping it over, the last thing to do is to add your ear wire to your beautiful crystal earrings, taking it and opening up that earring by pulling to the side on the ear wire, sliding on that wire guard, and closing it up. There's a lot of variations you can do with how you do the fringe along the bottom here. You can add more crystals and add them to the sides like I did with this one here, and really play and have fun. Make sure if you make any changes to comment below and help out other Potomac beaders if you change up any sizes, any questions that you have too. And if you want to make it with different size rivolis, you can certainly do that as well. Thanks so much for joining me to create these beautiful crystal earrings. There are so many variations that you can do, and I can't wait to see all of your pictures of your earrings in our Facebook group for beading and jewelry making. Remember, if you need any of the materials or want to check out the colors that we have in the 18mm rivolis, look below the video in the description for a link to our site there. As always, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss anything from us here at Potomac Beads. Thanks so much, Potomac beaders, and stay tuned for more inspirational designs.